in here. All right, so here we go. Okay, so today we are going to be, and sorry, hello, my name is Lainey. I am the host of the True Crime Fan Club podcast, which is hopefully why you're here. If you've never listened to the show, no worries. You should definitely get on it, but definitely no worries if you haven't. I have a new little setup in here because my husband got his computer and all this fun stuff put together. So that's what I have now. And tonight I am drinking 19 Crimes. I brought the bottle in here because I don't want to have to get up and get a refill if I need it. 19 Crimes is one of my favorite budget wines. I just ordered a whole bunch on Wink, which if you haven't used it, you should because it's magnificent. Okay, so everybody, make sure you tell me what you're drinking. Let's cheers. Happy to be here with you guys today. Okay. And you may hear my dogs barking at some point today. My husband's having food delivered. And you may hear him come and give me my food for later. Okay, so here we go. We're going to be talking about Anthony Sowell. And I'm going to share my screen with you so that you can see the fun little guy about. So this is Anthony here. What a guy, right? These are the victims that we are going to be talking about. It's a really, really interesting case and a really sad case. A lot of it was just a bunch of failure. So I'm going to go back to the camera mode. So he was born in August 1959 to parents Thomas Sowell Sr. and Claudia Garrison. Thomas Sr. had 4 children from a previous relationship. Claudia, his wife, had 2 children from a previous relationship. She would have another child in the marriage outside of Anthony, or 7 years after Anthony was born, same father. His dad was, as you know, with these tales, sometimes his dad was in and out of his life constantly because he was constantly getting in trouble with the law. Let me know if you can't hear me pretty good or anything like that. He was constantly getting in trouble with the law, and he was never really a part of Anthony's life. Anthony, because there were so many children in the house and because, you know, his mom was technically a single mother by that point, he really kind of just relied on himself and was pretty self-sufficient. I think we all know those children who can play by themselves and entertain themselves, and we think they're so great and wonderful. But this kind of worked against Anthony in some way. His mom, like I said, single mom, she was often working multiple jobs to try and support her family. And then that meant that Anthony was left alone in the care of his siblings or by himself. They also didn't really have a stable home environment. So, sorry, I keep looking at who's coming in. So, if you see my eyes starting around, don't worry. They also didn't have a really stable home environment. So, his mom, because of the nature of the work that she did, and how temporary it could be sometimes, they moved every few months. They never got a chance to settle in school or make any friends. And when Anthony was 12, he suffered an immense loss. He witnessed his sister Patricia pass away. She had an asthma attack. And she was 29 years old at the time of passing, at the time of her passing. Patricia herself had 7 children, and then those children came to live with Anthony's mother, aka Patricia's mom, as well, and those kids' grandmother. Patricia herself had 5 kids before she was even 18. She had conjoined twins, and Claudia didn't even hold a funeral for Patricia, which is odd, but maybe it's because they couldn't afford it. They weren't very well-to-do, and I think we all know that regardless of what era it was in, that funerals are expensive. So because she had taken in these children, she also received social security checks and money for all of the children that she had. She was basically, with that money, able to purchase a 10-bedroom house for herself, her children, and all of Patricia's children. They also moved Patricia's mother, oh no, sorry, Claudia's mother into the house with them. But with this change, it became a really abusive household for Patricia's children in particular. They often beat the children and made the other children watch while that happened. And many of those kids became institutionalized as they grew up because of the trauma that they experienced from their abuse. Anthony said himself, and of course, to me, none of this is an excuse for his actions, but he said himself that his mother never hugged him and never once said that she loved him. He excelled in school, he did a good job, but he was often picked on because he was quiet and shy. And I mean, you know how schoolyard bullies are. He went all the way to his senior year in high school, but when he found out that he wasn't even going to graduate, he decided to drop out and quit. He joined the Marines when he was 18 as a result, because he wanted to prove to everybody that he could make something of himself and do something. He had a girlfriend at the time who was 17, and she told him while he was at boot camp that she was pregnant, and she gave birth to a daughter named Julie. Anthony did really well in the structured environment of boot camp. He was really, I think, seeking that structure whenever he went to boot camp. So, you know, he did a really, or he really excelled in there. He graduated with honors and was the only person in his class at the time to be moved from private to private first class, which is incredible. He learned to disable and kill using his bare hands in the military. He became a really capable predator because of this training that he received. And of course, you know, the military or the Marine Corps doesn't necessarily give you this training because they want you to kill, you know, civilians or anything like that. But it's truly because they want you to be able to, you know, get it together in wartime. And just a reminder for everybody, I always say this, but just a reminder, if you are watching this stream on anywhere but Get Vocal, I can't see your comments or your questions. So if you wouldn't mind, you can join on Get Vocal and you can ask questions. You can even ask questions throughout the episode, and I can try and answer those for you. But yeah, so I just want to make sure everybody knows. There's also, I like to just kind of give a little rundown. There's also a little V down there that's kind of like V coins, like what Twitch coins are. So you could use that if you wanted to. Just saying, I like people to know everything. Anywho, so he continued to grow in the Marine Corps. He spent 7 years in Cherry Point, North Carolina, and then he moved and served and was in Japan. He spent a lot of time going to the red light district in Japan, in Okinawa City to be specific. His goal, what he said later in interviews, his goal was to find a sex worker or an exotic dancer, give her a couple dollars for sex, and then take her back to his room and have his way with her. He wanted to really act out a lot of his deviant fantasies, which included bondage, choking, and domination. Now, we don't kink shame on this podcast, so, you know, there are people who are into things like that, but this was clearly meant to hurt the person. He often exerted his power by saying that he was a sergeant in the military. And so the women that he was with would later claim that because he was a sergeant, they felt like they had to do what Anthony said. He then met a woman named Kim Lawson, and in September of 1981, he married her. They had a tumultuous relationship. Anthony, of course, had spent a lot of time building up his alcohol habit. And so he had alcohol issues, which got him into a lot of trouble in the Marines. But He, despite getting in trouble, he was actually never sent to rehab, never really disciplined for it. Um, so that was kind of interesting to hear because, I have a sibling in the military and they're really strict about everything and how you represent yourself. So I thought that that was really interesting that they did not really do a lot to him. In 1982, a radiator hose blew up in his face and while he was working on a car. So he was left with second and third degree burns, and he had some damage to his corneas, which left him blind for 3 months. So he finally leaves the Marine Corps, age 25, honorably discharged, and he'd been promoted to sergeant, got a sharpshooter award, and all that great and wonderful stuff. But in 1985, he ended up divorcing Kim, and he moved back into the home where he kind of grew up, that 10-bedroom home that his mother had purchased. He shared a bedroom with his nephew. When he came back, his family reported that he was really different from the Anthony they knew prior to the Marine Corps. He had a lot of anger issues and he was really drinking very heavily. Although we don't know the victim's name, in 1988, he was convicted of. Thank you, love. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. My husband's here, delivering the goods, as they say. Thank you. You guys miss Bubba. He was very excited to be featured in that video. Anywho, so in 1988, like I said, we don't know the victim's name, but he was convicted of domestic violence. So when we were looking back in the research, we didn't really see much. The victim wasn't named in the police report, but he did spend a week in jail. He was arrested on and off again in 1988 and 89 for drug possession, disorderly conduct, driving while intoxicated, criminal trespassing, and public drunkenness and aggravated burglary. Like, he was staying pretty busy, I'd say. Cheers. If you haven't been drinking, drink. Or if you don't drink some water. Stay hydrated during these crazy times. We got some Country Burger, which is a local food joint. We're trying to support local business while we're in this fun little quarantine. And Country Burger is my jam. Anywho, so on July 22nd, 1989, Anthony picks up 21-year-old, 3-month pregnant Melvette Sockwell at a hotel. He tells Melvette that her boyfriend asked him to pick her up, and he drove them back to his place. They get there around 6:15 in the morning, and he said, hey, you know what? Let's go upstairs and, hang out. And he took her to his bedroom, locked the door, and then made her sit down. He then came up behind her with a really long knife, threw her on the bed, choked her, and then repeatedly raped her. So in between each rape, and just FYI, this is a really graphic crime, so I'm not going to go into super details about everything, but he was really, really depraved in the things that he did. So after each time that he raped her, he would make her get up and go take a bath so that, she didn't have any evidence on her. But then he would also make her get dressed again and then repeat the whole thing as if he was pressing a reset button. So I think that was really odd. Melvette, of course, was fearful and screamed. And so Anthony put a towel in her mouth to kind of muffle the sound. She was in his home for 15 hours before he bound her mouth, wrists, and ankles together to make sure that he could take a nap if he wanted to. He had been drinking that entire time, and so he was getting really tired. Melvette was able to escape through the third floor window. So she had managed to get out of her bindings, and she went out through, so she didn't get out of her bindings. She kind of just hopped through the window and fell to the ground. There were 2 women who passed her as she fell through the window. And then Anthony's youngest sister ended up seeing her and untied her restraints and was like, hey, why are you here at this house and why are you bound? So the police were obviously called, and Melvette was taken to the hospital to be treated for her injuries. And then Anthony was arrested for multiple counts of rape and kidnapping. He was released on bail, but of course didn't show up to his hearing. So an arrest warrant was issued. In 1990, on June 24th, he was still on the run from the law, still had a bench warrant for his arrest, and he had choked and raped a 31-year-old Cleveland woman. We don't know her name. When he fell asleep again, the woman called the authorities, and Anthony was arrested again, but this time the charges were dropped because the victim was too afraid to testify. He was finally, though, in custody for Melvette's rape, and so they sentenced him to 5 to 15 years in prison, but he would be transferred about 3 times. He earned his GED in prison. He was a model prisoner. And again, I think it's because he thrives in structured environments. So he just really sadly excelled in prison. He didn't receive any type of treatment while in prison, so no sex offender treatment. He signed up in 1993 to receive treatment, but was ultimately denied because he refused to admit that he had committed any type of sexual offense. So because of this, he served a full 15-year sentence. In 2004, Anthony's father passed away, and his family during this entire 15-year sentence didn't even bother meeting up with him or coming to visit him. He was released in 2005 with a 6% chance to reoffend. He was classified as a sexually oriented offender, which is a really low classification. That meant that his neighbors and basically the community didn't have to be aware of his status at all. So he moves in with his sister back into the house that he went back to after coming in from the Marines, after coming home from the Marines. But then he moved to his stepmother's house on 12205 Imperial Avenue. And Sam actually has a picture of what we will be talking about later, the sausage factory. That was right next to it. So after moving in, his stepmom became ill and then eventually was hospitalized. So Anthony kind of had the house to himself. He then met a woman named Lori Frazier, and they started dating each other. He found out that Lori was a crack addict, and before he knew it, he kind of also developed a little bit of a habit of smoking crack as well. After he started smoking crack, then the relationship just crumbled. He had a personality change. He had a really unorganized, messy house, and he was always throwing parties. And then he was especially mean to Lori. In 2007, he had heart surgery, but he never went to rehab and was let go from his job at a rubber factory because he could no longer perform the physical requirements. So then he started scrapping for scrap metal and copper wire, and Lori stopped living with him and broke up with him. Anthony said that he felt betrayed by this and that he would eventually get revenge. So the Imperial neighborhood that's in Cleveland, and this story takes place in Cleveland, Ohio. Sorry. The Imperial neighborhood at the time that Anthony was living in it was rampant with drug houses, poverty, and crime. It was really an excellent place for Anthony to be because he could throw parties whenever he wanted. He can meet women who were desperate for drugs or for money, and they would do anything for a little bit of whatever their addiction was. Preying on these vulnerable women is exactly how Anthony met his first murder victim in 2007. Her name was Crystal Dozier. She was 38 years old, and she went to Anthony's house to get a fix. We don't know exactly what happened, but he ended up binding her ankles and hands with some cable that he had nearby. He then strangled her to death and put a trash bag over her upper torso. and then another one on her lower part of her body. He then wrapped duct tape around the trash bags that were covering her body, and he dug a shallow grave and put her body in it and covered it with dirt and plywood. It's assumed that he did sexually assault her because that's typically his MO for any of the crimes that he had. On June 11th, 2007, one of Crystal's children ended up filing a missing persons report because they hadn't seen her. And it was typical for her sometimes to go, days, weeks without calling, but there was a substantial amount of time that had passed before they were like, hey, you know what? Something's going on. She hasn't ever gone this long. But then that's also when reports of a foul smell coming from Anthony's house started being reported. So authorities came to check on it because they got a lot of complaints about it. And they said it was either a dead animal nearby or the sausage company that was next door. So after the murder of Crystal Dozier, which also, can we talk about how ridiculous it is to say that this foul odor is coming from a sausage company? Like, hello, unless you're vegan or a vegetarian, sausage smells delicious. So I don't get that. And it's really unfortunate because the sausage company did a ton of things to help try and eliminate the smell. So after Crystal Dozier was murdered, he waited a full year before he killed again. In 2008, he met 31-year-old Tashana Culver. She was a nursing assistant and a beautician. She had been estranged from her family since March of 2008, and she was wanting to score some drugs. She did not have a bad childhood, but she did experience the loss of her boyfriend, which triggered some depression in her, which caused her to seek out trying to numb that pain with drug usage. Her boyfriend completed suicide in a local park. So she tried to get through it, and she tried to also withdraw from the drugs, but she was not successful in that. In order to continue to keep up her drug habit, unfortunately, she engaged in sex work to continue to buy her drugs. So Anthony meets her, invites her over to his house for a party. There's going to be alcohol, he tells her. There's also going to be some crack. And so she was like, you know what? I've seen him around the neighborhood. He's a pretty quiet dude, pretty unassuming. If you've seen the picture that we showed earlier, he doesn't look threatening at all. He seems kind of meek until you realize what he's done. She ended up, of course, meeting the same fate of Crystal Dozier. She noticed a change in his demeanor as he forced her to undress, and he began to rape and sodomize her, and continuously she was being punched in the face while this was happening. He eventually strangled her to death and then did the same thing that he did with Crystal, which was put her body in a trash bag. But instead of burying it, he just put it underneath the crawl space of his home. Her family did not actually report her missing until her body had been discovered later on in this investigation. They thought that she was living in Akron, Ohio this entire time. And since she had already kind of been estranged, they didn't know that she was, gone, if you will. The next victim is 25-year-old Lashanda Long. She was the third and youngest victim of Anthony's. She was, like many of these women, known to disappear for days, weeks, months. She went missing in 2008. And her family, even though they were used to her kind of being a nomad, figured that she was out again on one of her long little jaunts. And, she was probably trying to get some drugs, or she was on a binge. Now, she had a very troubled childhood. She was born to a mother who was addicted to drugs, and she couldn't even care for her or for LaShonda's 5 siblings. Her father, Jim, oddly enough, was a correctional officer who tried to do his best to raise all of his children, but I think he became overwhelmed, and so she eventually went to live with her aunt. She started to rebel at kind of an early age, and at 14 years old, or maybe whenever you expect. I'm not a parent, so I don't know. Maybe when you expect your kids to rebel. So that's what she did. She would run away from home. She was trying to see her mom. And it's really unfortunate that that's kind of what she was seeking. She was seeking the love and acceptance from her mother, who, was deep into drugs at the time. So she herself would have 3 children by the time she was 17 years old, and her children were taken from her by the state and given to different relatives to raise. She turned to drugs, of course, to dull the pain that she was in. And I say, of course, because it's so readily available to her, and it's really unfortunate. Like I said, the neighborhood that she was in had it at her disposal. You could go to the next house and get it. So when I say, of course, that's what I mean. It's such an easy option to get it. And maybe there was also a feeling, and I've seen maybe too many intervention episodes where people try to get into the mindset of their parent and wonder what's so great about this drug that took you away from me, and then they end up getting really addicted to it. So we don't know a lot about her murder, but he generally kept with the same MO, where he would rape, strangle, and then dispose of their bodies. But with LaShonda, the only difference with her in particular is that he decapitated her and discarded her head in a bucket, and then he put her body in a completely separate location. So that's the only thing that kind of sets LaShonda's death out apart from everybody else's. Michelle Mason was 45 years old when she was last seen in October of 2008. She also had a drug issue, but she had, when she was 16 years old, she had tried to move to New York, and she stayed there for 5 years before she decided to come back home to Cleveland. It was in New York that she acquired her drug addiction, and she contracted HIV and had been diagnosed as bipolar. She had 2 children on her hip when she came back to her mother's house. And since she was addicted to crack at the time, her mother took over the care of the children. She was arrested periodically for drug use and solicitation. And her mother said that by the time that Michelle went missing, she had already quit drugs, and she had stopped engaging in sex work, but she still liked to go out and party. She was once shot in the face, which caused her to lose her left eye during a dispute. And it eventually was replaced with a prosthetic. So she liked to party so much, but during one party, there was an argument that happened, and she lost her eye because of it. The initial dispute occurred. The reason that the gun was pulled on her is because she was engaging in unprotected sex and didn't disclose her HIV status until much later, which obviously caused that person to have some anger towards them. 2 days after Michelle went missing, her mom ended up filing a missing persons report and put posters all around the neighborhood to see if, there would be anybody who had seen her. She went to this beverage store that Anthony frequented, or little convenience store. It was called Imperial Beverage. And she was going there to make sure that the flyers were still up. And she was told by the store owner that Anthony Soule had actually come in and removed the posters from there. And so she thought that that was weird. But nobody would ever say that they had seen Michelle in the neighborhood, and she was murdered as pretty much like the rest of the women were. He had a dormant period in 2008. Not sure why, but it was likely because he was trying to have a low cover. But he usually waited around 2 months in between each killing before he continued his spree again. Um, Tanya Carmichael was 52 years old when she was last seen alive on November 10th, 2008. She was addicted to crack and wanted to have some fun, so she asked her mom to give her $20 so she could get her truck door fixed. And her mother gave her the money, even though she thought that she would likely be using it to get some drugs. But um, she ended up finding Tanya's truck on the side of the road on in or near Imperial Avenue, which is near Anthony's home, with no sign of Tanya, but the door had been fixed. So she did keep her word and got the door fixed, which is really sad when you think about it. Her mother, Barbara, contacted Cleveland police to report her daughter missing. And I think what we see a lot in true crime, especially with women of color who go missing, women who are addicted to drugs, or women who are in or engage in sex work, that oftentimes their disappearances are not taken seriously because of the type of lifestyle that they lead, even though that's not an excuse. Law enforcement, that's not an excuse to not look into somebody's disappearance or take them, take their family's request or report seriously. Charlie just released an episode kind of similar to this, and Charlie hosts Crime Lines, where they didn't take it seriously. And she made a statement that the police should trust the family. Like, they're the ones who know their children the best, and they're the ones who know the habits of this person. So when they say this is not like them, that should take place, that should be taken more seriously. So the Cleveland police ended up telling her that she'll come home when the drugs run out, and kind of dismissed Barbara's report. And of course, as we know, or spoiler alert, she did not make it home. And Anthony, of course, continued the same way with her as well. And he buried her in the backyard. So after Barbara reported Tanya missing, this was 6 days after that, a woman named Gladys Wade had flagged down the Cleveland police, and she was bloodied, bruised, and terrified. She told the police exactly what had happened earlier that evening. She said she was walking to a bus stop, and she stopped by the beverage store, the Imperial Beverage Store, around 5:30. She left the store, she bought a beverage, and passed Anthony on her way. He said, "Merry Christmas. How about you come back to my place and have a beer?" And she was like, "No, thanks. I'm good. I already have my beer, but Merry Christmas to you." She continued walking, and Anthony didn't like being rejected. So he grabbed her by the shoulder and spins her around, and he starts punching her several times in the face and on the side of the head, which instantly knocks her out. She comes to a little bit later as she's being dragged up the driveway, and she tries to fight him off. And she was wearing a turtleneck at the time because it was cold, and he was pulling her by the turtleneck, which meant that if she kept fighting against him, that she would eventually strangle herself. So she stopped, and she ended up passing out again. She came to inside the house, and this time she was next to a Christmas tree. And she was in a lot of pain and hurting all over. And so she screamed out loud. When she did that, Anthony came back inside and started punching her again. It was clear that he was attempting or wanting to rape her at that point. And so he managed to get her up the stairs, and they kind of had a little bit of a scuffle, and then they they doubled over and fell down the stairs together. She then grabs Anthony's testicles and squeezed them really hard, like digging her nails in them. And so he, cries out in pain, and he lets go of her. And so she manages to run out the door and try and get help. She saw some guys outside, and she's asking them for help or telling them to call the police. And Anthony walks up and says, "Hey, ignore her. She was just trying to steal my watch." And so the guys are like, "Oh, okay," and dismiss it. And I think you'll see that a lot in those types of neighborhoods where, nobody really wants to engage in any type of dispute that seems to be going on between, or any type of domestic dispute. So the guys disengage and they leave. Gladys then runs away to a pizzeria that's nearby, and she's banging on the door, and they tell her that she needs to leave because they didn't want to get involved. So, mind you, she's bloody and swollen, and they're like, "Sorry, don't want to get involved. Please leave." Anthony runs into her again and throws her coat at her, and she was ready to, dip out of the neighborhood. And she ran 12 blocks until she was able to spot a Cleveland police cruiser. And that's where she that's when she told them the entire story of what happened. They go up to Anthony's house and they see that he's scratched up, and he's arrested for attempted rape and murder. Cheers. And just a reminder, if anybody is talking to me on any other platform other than Get Vocal, I cannot see it. So if you're asking me questions, I'm so sorry. I cannot see you. But thank you for joining me on the other platforms. You guys are bae. Okay. So let me see. Sorry. I get distracted by myself and I'm like, what did I just say? Anywho, so then we move on to Tanya Doss. She was hanging out with Anthony in April of 2009, and she had actually known him since 2005. They dated on and off for several years during that time frame. She was planning on bringing her friend over to a party at Anthony's house. And she had always known him to be this kind guy. He would have cookouts for the neighborhood and kind of just have, like a block party in front of his house. She didn't think anything of it, or she didn't think anything really was amiss until he had this demeanor change, and he gets up and shows her a jumpsuit that he's planning on giving to his ex-girlfriend, Lori Frazier. And Tanya was like, "Okay, why are you showing me this?" They'd been hanging out, drinking, smoking crack, partying. And she's like, "Why are you telling me anything about this?" And he said that, Lori would like it, and they changed the subject. Then she all of a sudden is tackled by Anthony, and he's attempting to strangle her. And he says, "You know what? Knock on the floor 3 times if you want to live." And of course she knocks. So he's just continuously slapping her, attempting to remove her clothes. She didn't understand what was going on or what was happening. And he rapes her over the course of the evening. And he doesn't rape her. He just forces her to lie next to him the entire night, but he doesn't touch her again after that. She basically has to sleep nude next to him. So the next day, wakes up and is like, none of this ever happened. Gives her a beer. She's still freaking out and scared. And so she takes the beer because she is just trying to placate him at this point. She fakes a call and says, "Oh, I got to, go help my daughter out. She needs some help." And so Anthony surprisingly allows her to leave and checks up on her periodically. "Oh, we got a visitor." Checks up on her periodically throughout the day to see if she's okay, which is so strange. They typically call this with sexual status the heating and cooling off period. She told her friend Nancy that he choked the F out of me, but unbeknownst to Tanya, Nancy had already known Anthony, and she unfortunately wishes that she had reported the assault because it might have saved Nancy's life. She was a 43-year-old mother to 3 children. She was a hard worker, very loyal friend, and she had a very serious crack addiction. She was last seen on April 24th, 2009 by her daughter, and she said she was going to a neighborhood store, likely the Imperial Beverage, and she was never seen again. She was reported within 24 hours of making no contact with her family. Anthony, again, had found her, raped her, and strangled her, and wrapped her body in black trash bags and a comforter and threw her in the crawl space of his home. And mind you, that he has all of these women in his home and they are decaying. He then has a nonstop killing spree, 3 more victims, Talisha Forston, Janice Webb, and Kim Yvette Smith. They were all murdered in quick succession. Then another woman named Diane Turner was murdered in September of 2009, and she was placed next to Nancy. The murders finally stopped in October of 2009. And the reason we don't go into, and I say we, i.e. me, we don't go into a lot of detail with the last women is because there isn't a lot known about them, unfortunately. But on October 11th, 2009, there was a detective for the Cleveland Police Department named Richard Durst, not Robert Durst. And he began working the rape case by Latundra Billups. He had the case since September, and he hadn't been able to reach her, and then he finally was able to. She gave a statement, and she said, you know what, if you go over to his house, my pink sweater should still be there. So they issue a search warrant for his house, and the SWAT team goes out to execute the search warrant. He's not home at the time that this warrant is being served, but they have the ability to enter. So they do enter the home, and they begin searching for what Latundra said would be there, which is her pink sweater. So as they continue up the house, remember this is 3 floors, so they found her pink sweater. Then they start to notice the foul odor that's coming from the house. And as SWAT officers and police officers, they know what that smell is. And so they start kind of looking around and kind of following the smell, and they see that there's 2 bodies covered loosely with a black plastic trash bag. And then they find 11 more bodies. Then 2 days later, he's finally arrested and caught. He doesn't put up a fight. He goes peacefully. He's put into an interrogation room and asked about why there's bodies found in his home. He says, you know what? I don't know anything about that. I've told you the same thing over and over. You're not listening to me. I don't remember killing anybody. So they continue to question him and continue to ask him, like, what happened? Tell us what happened. And they say, did you do this? Are you the person who did this? And he goes, you know what? I guess I did that. It had to be me. So he's charged with 11 counts of aggravated murder, 70 counts of rape, kidnapping, tampering with evidence, and abuse of a corpse. He entered a plea of not guilty by reason of insanity, but then changed it to guilty because when you're on crack, you can't say you're crazy for doing what you do. Women that he raped would testify to the attacks that he perpetrated on them. Prison buddies would testify on his behalf, which I would never get a prisoner to say, like, hey, I was a great model prisoner. But his defense thought it was a great idea. So they had some of his prison buddies show up and attest to the fact that he was a model prisoner. He was eventually found guilty and sentenced to death, and he is currently housed in Chillicothe Correctional Institution, which is where my dad is from, so I know how to say Chillicothe. He's, of course, appealed his conviction, saying that his Sixth Amendment right was violated. It was denied. The house that was on Imperial Avenue was demolished. And the city leaders at the time said, hey, you know what? Let's make this a memorial because that's what we want to do. And if you remember, they said the same thing about the Cleveland 3 that had been taken by Ariel Castro. But they never followed through with building anything on that land, and it still stays empty today. And I think Sam can attest to that because that's what happened. So that is the story. And if you guys want to see what Anthony looks like, hold please, because he looks completely different from, who we're kind of used to seeing on there. He's aged quite a bit and it's very strange. So I'm going to show you what he looks like now. Hold please. And then if you want to, I'm going to open it up. So if you want to join, ask some questions, you can. And so I'm going to show you. Sorry, it's going to get a little like, whoa. Inception. So this is Anthony now. That's that guy. See, looks completely different, but you can also see the scars and the third-degree burns that he suffered on his face. You can kind of see all of that, but he's aged pretty much the same way. But yeah, it's intense to see that this guy is responsible for the deaths of all of these women, plus more. So yeah, I just thought I would share that with you, and I'm going to switch back to the camera. So any questions, comments, concerns? And just a reminder that if you are joining us on Get Vocal for the first time, if you're joining us on Get Vocal for the first time, then you can send me send me an email to tcfcpod@gmail.com with your mailing address and show me that you're subscribed to the show, and I will send you some fun stuff. I'm waiting on a couple more things to come in before I send this stuff out next week. So if you want to be one of those people, then let me know. You could get a fun little sticker. We have some awesome keychains that were made by a really good friend of ours. They're like wood burned keychains or something like that. But if you guys have any questions, let me know. We do have a surprise that we are going to be releasing weekly episodes of the show, kind of while we can, which is fun and awesome. Again, if you guys are talking to me anywhere but Get Vocal, I cannot see you. So sorry. Sam said that the city spent thousands of dollars, the sausage company that was next door spent thousands of dollars like fixing their AC units and their filtering system because the city was all over them about the smell. Pretty nuts. I didn't drink as much as my wine this time because I was talking a lot. And so next time, what do you guys think? Do you like the longer stories? Do you want a shorter story? Let me know, because this really ate up the hour. It's kind of nuts. How's everybody doing in quarantine? Hopefully everybody's staying safe. Just let me know if you guys have any questions. What is this? Sorry. If you have any questions or anything like that about the show, about the episode, I will say that the next 2 episodes for TCFC are a little interesting. The next episode that comes out next Monday is a departure from what we normally do. We don't typically cover cases like this, but it was really interesting, and I think it has a good twist to it. And then the one that's coming out on May 4th is really sad, but it's a case I really, really wanted to talk about, so it's likely one that we will discuss that Thursday on the podcast, and on this stream. So any questions, comments, concerns, let me know. And like I said, if you guys, if you haven't taken advantage of it, if you haven't taken advantage of sending me your mailing address, and I don't really care where you are, I mail internationally all the time. Like I said, I think it's cool. So if you are anywhere outside of the US, then I'm happy to send you some items. It may take a little while to get there because I have to go inside the post office to fill out a customs form for magnets and stickers and buttons and stuff. So if you haven't, Raven says she's currently working. Well, thanks for joining, Raven. Oh, yeah, Raven's going to be getting some stuff soon, too. I really don't like that Charlie is on the same time channel as me. It really makes me mad because I really love her show, and I would love to discuss the latest episode. If you haven't listened to it, listen to it. Any other comments, questions? What's everybody drinking? Nobody even said. Hi, War Baby. Make sure you tune into hers too. It was a great conversation last time, and you killed the whole hour. So great job, girl. Sam says the city promised that they would help put Rays financially or help out raise financially, but so far they haven't helped at all. It's a minority owned business that has been around for 67 years. Isn't that crazy? That's what I'm saying. Like, they don't ever do that. War Baby, who hosts one of my favorite podcasts, before I even knew her, I found the show. It's called Murderous Minors, Killer Kids. And it is a subject that I am eternally fascinated by because I don't understand what causes children to want to murder people. So she really does a great job of diving into the case, but then also giving you feedback on or giving you examples of legislation that happened because of it. And she does a really great job of kind of explaining everything that happens and why the case may have turned out the way it did, which sometimes can be frustrating, but it is a really great podcast. And so I recommend listening to it if that's a subject that you are interested in. It's a really great show. Miss AZ is back, and she says she's drinking Fireball and Coke Zero. See, okay, listen, I found an incredible recipe for this kind of like apple cidery thing, and it has cinnamon whiskey in it, apple juice, lime juice or lemon juice, and something else like cinnamon, like fresh cinnamon. It's so good. Oh my God. It's delicious. And Raven says she wishes she had some wine. But yeah, me too. Well, I mean, I wish you had some wine too. I have wine. But yeah, I haven't had wine in a long time. So I thought I'd get some for the stream. I ordered a bunch of Wink Wine, which is one of our sponsors for the show. They're a sponsor for since last year. They're really great. But I love having them, especially in this quarantine, because I can order all my wine and get it here, and it's wonderful. They have some really good stuff. Like I tried a Carignan, which I never heard of before until I was in New Mexico tasting some wine with my best friend. And when I found it, I was like, oh, this is legit. So I'm excited. Let's see. Oh, and if we continue, so I have a lot of wonderful, weird little promo items that I've received from listeners of the show who have small businesses I like to support. This is from one of my cousins who made this. So she makes little tumblers, and she made this for me specifically. But I have a bunch of these for True Crime Fan Club and for my paranormal show. So I'm saying we might do a little drawing and see for, hello, Fresh. Okay. Might do a little drawing to see who joins us, in a couple weeks. And from the listeners that are there or in the live stream, we'll do a drawing and have somebody win a tumbler. We can do that every so often because I have a lot. And I love doing stuff like that. It's a lot of fun for me. I like seeing people having stuff of mine in terms of the show. Okay, you guys. So I think I'm going to go ahead and end it. But I really had a great time with you today. Thank you so much for engaging with me in the stream. Again, you guys, if you are on any other platform other than Get Vocal, then I can't see what you're asking me. So feel free. You know what? Maybe next time I'll do a Twitter thing so I can follow questions and you can tweet me on Twitter if you're doing it. But anyways, I hope you guys have a great rest of the evening. And at 8 o'clock, my friend Josh Hallmark, who hosts the True Crime Bullshit podcast, will be doing his live stream on Kelly Cochran, and that lady is nuts. So if you are interested in hearing more about that and are listening and up to date on True Crime Bullshit, then I recommend joining him for that stream. And then War Baby is going to be on at 10 Central Time, and I think she's Pacific Standard, so 10, 9, 8, what is it, 7 p.m. Central, I think. I don't know. She can tell me. She'll tell me. But so stay tuned for the rest of the evening if you need to kill some time because it's a lot of fun. I'm going to go join Josh's stream here in a minute. So thanks again, you guys, for joining me. I hope you have a wonderful rest of the evening. Make sure you're staying safe. I hope your families are safe and healthy. And I hope that you're washing your hands, you nasty people. I'm just kidding. You're not nasty. But yes, please make sure you're washing your hands, covering your face, do all those things. Oh, it's 8 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. Sorry. Make sure you're washing your hands, keeping your social distance, and hopefully I will see you here again next week. And if you have a subject you recommend, just let me know. You can put a message in here. You can chat anywhere on my social medias at TCFC Pod. And let me know about a case you want to discuss. But otherwise, I'll look and see what case I'm going to do next week because I have no idea yet. All right, you guys. Thank you so much for joining me. Have a great night. Oh, wait. Hold on. Somebody needs to tell you bye. Come here. Come here. Okay, he's a little chicken. Oh, he said goodbye, everybody. Thanks for coming and seeing my mama. He doesn't know what's going on. Say bye, Gert. Okay. So he says bye. All right. Love you guys. Bye. Have a good day, night, evening. Enjoy your work. Stay safe. Bye.